What happens when a country music superstar and a sharp-tongued talk show host go head-to-head on live television? In just 24 seconds, a simple conversation turned into one of the most explosive moments in daytime TV history. Before we dive into this insane confrontation, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. We bring you daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Last night's episode of The View became the talk of the entertainment world after Blake Shelton's appearance went completely off the rails. What was supposed to be a light conversation about his new music quickly turned into a full-blown war of words with co-host Joy Behar that left the entire studio in shock. Blake walked onto the stage with his usual laid-back charm, waving to the audience as they cheered. He took his seat at the table, smiling at the panel of hosts. Everything seemed normal. The lighting was perfect, the cameras were rolling, and the audience was excited to see one of country music's biggest stars up close. Whoopi started things off with a warm welcome. "Blake Shelton, everybody, great to have you here," she said, and the audience erupted in applause again. Blake grinned and nodded his thanks. The conversation started innocently enough, with Sunny Hostin asking about his latest album. "So tell us about the new music. What can fans expect?" she asked with genuine interest. Blake lit up talking about his passion. "Well, I wanted to go back to my roots a bit. This album has a lot of that traditional country sound that I grew up loving. We recorded it in Nashville over about 6 months, and I think it's some of my best work." The audience clapped. Sarah Haynes jumped in with questions about the voice, and Blake answered with his trademark humor, making everyone laugh with stories about his fellow coaches. "Kelly Clarkson still thinks she's funnier than me," he joked. "But we all know the truth." The audience ate it up. For about 5 minutes, everything was going perfectly. Blake was relaxed, the hosts were engaged, and the energy was positive. Alyssa Farenthold asked about his life in Oklahoma, and Blake talked about his property and how much he loved being away from the Hollywood chaos. "It must be nice to escape all the craziness out there," Alyssa said. "Oh, it absolutely is," Blake replied. "I can just be myself, No pressure, no cameras, just me and my dogs, and some good country air." But then Joy Behar shifted in her seat, and anyone who watches The View regularly knows what that means. She was getting ready to strike. "Blake, I've got to ask you something," she said, leaning forward with that look she gets when she's about to stir the pot. Her tone had changed completely. "You've been pretty quiet about politics lately. Is that because you know your fans wouldn't like what you have to say?" The shift in the room was immediate. The other hosts glanced at each other. The audience's energy changed. Blake's smile faded slightly, and you could see him processing what was happening. "Joy, I'm here to talk about music," he said, his tone still friendly but with an edge. "I don't really think this is the place for that kind of discussion." Joy tilted her head, clearly not satisfied with that answer. "Oh, come on," she pressed, waving her hand dismissively. "You can't just hide behind your guitar forever. You've got millions of followers. You've got a platform. Don't you think you have a responsibility to speak up about what's happening in this country?" The audience went quiet. You could feel the tension building like a storm cloud forming overhead. Blake shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. His whole body language changed. "I think my responsibility is to make music that people enjoy," he replied, his voice firmer now. "Not everyone needs to hear my political opinions. I like to keep that stuff private." "That's convenient," Joy shot back, and there was an edge to her voice that cut through the air. "Especially when staying silent protects your career, right? You don't want to lose those fans. So you just say nothing?" Blake's face turned red. You could see the anger rising in him like water coming to a boil. "Are you serious right now?" he asked, his voice rising. "You don't know a damn thing about what I believe, or why I choose to keep certain things private. You don't know me." The audience gasped at his tone. This wasn't the friendly country star they'd seen moments before. This was someone who felt cornered and was coming out swinging. Joy leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. I know you're avoiding the question. That tells me everything I need to know. No, it doesn't. Blake shot back immediately. It tells you that I have boundaries. It tells you that I don't think every single person needs to broadcast their political beliefs for your approval. Whoopi Goldberg tried to step in, raising her hands. Hey, let's just take it down a notch here. Blake, Joy, we can have this conversation without— No, Whoopi, Blake interrupted, his Oklahoma accent getting thicker as his anger grew. You could hear the frustration pouring out of him. I came here as a favor, because your producers called my team 3 times. 3 times. They said it would be fun, said we'd talk about music and The Voice. I didn't come here to get ambushed on national television. Joy scoffed, and the sound of it seemed to make Blake even angrier. Ambushed? I asked you one question, Blake. One question. If you can't handle a simple question, maybe you shouldn't be on talk shows. Maybe you should stick to singing. A simple question? Blake repeated, his voice getting louder with each word. You just accused me of being a coward on national television. You basically called me a sellout who's too scared to have an opinion. The cameras zoomed in on both of their faces. Blake's was red with anger. Joy's was set in stubborn defiance. The other hosts exchanged worried glances, clearly unsure of how to handle what was unfolding. Sarah Haynes tried desperately to change the subject. Blake, hey, let's talk about your upcoming tour. I heard you're hitting some cities that— She needs to apologize first, Blake demanded, pointing at Joy. His finger was shaking slightly, and his voice had gone cold. Right now, on camera, she needs to apologize for what she just said. The audience murmured. Some people were nodding in agreement. Others were shaking their heads. The studio had never felt more divided. Joy laughed, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. It was the kind of laugh that makes things worse. The kind that feels like mockery. Apologize? For what? For doing my job? This is a talk show, Blake. We ask questions. We have conversations. If you don't like it, there's the door. She actually gestured toward the exit as she said it. That gesture, that casual dismissal, was the breaking point. That's when Blake stood up. The chair scraped against the floor with a harsh sound that made everyone jump. You know what, Joy? You sit here every day acting like you're better than everyone else. Like you're the smartest person in the room. But you're just mean. You hide behind this table and take shots at people, and you call it journalism. You call it having conversations. But it's just bullying with a microphone. The studio went completely silent. Even the crew members stopped what they were doing. Cameras that had been moving froze in place. You could have heard a pin drop. Joy's face went from smug to angry in an instant. Excuse me? She said, her voice rising as she stood up to face him across the table. Don't you dare talk to me like that. I've been doing this for longer than you've been famous. I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, celebrities way bigger than you. Don't you dare come on this show and lecture me about journalism. Then act like it, Blake shouted, his voice echoing through the studio. Show some damn respect. You can ask tough questions without being cruel. You can have conversations without trying to make people look stupid. But you don't want that, do you? You want confrontation. You want drama. Well, congratulations, Joy. You got it. Whoopi stood up too, stepping around the table trying to get between them. Okay, we need to cut to commercial right now. Everyone just calm down. Let's all take a breath and— I'm not calming down, Joy said, her voice shaking with anger. Her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. He comes on my show and disrespects me like this? I don't think so. I won't stand for it. Blake laughed bitterly, and the sound was full of contempt. Your show? Last time I checked, there were 5 names in the title. Joy. It's called The View, not The Joy Show. But I guess you think it's all about you, don't you? I guess you think everyone else is just here to back you up while you attack people. The audience gasped. Some people started booing, though it wasn't clear who they were booing at. Others were cheering. The entire studio had descended into chaos. Security guards started moving closer to the stage, their radios crackling with instructions. just in case things got physical. That's it, Joy said, her face flushed red, pointing at him with a shaking finger. Get him out of here. Get him off my stage right now. I want him removed. Security. Blake ripped off his microphone before anyone could stop him. The wire snapped as he yanked it, and the sound it made was loud through the audio system. He threw it down on the table where it bounced and clattered. I'm already gone. I don't need this bullshit. I don't need to sit here and be insulted by someone who thinks asking loaded questions makes her some kind of hero. You're banned, Joy yelled after him, her voice cracking with emotion. You hear me? Don't ever come back here. You're not welcome on this show ever again. Blake was already walking toward the exit, but he turned back one more time. Trust me, he yelled, his voice carrying across the entire studio. I wouldn't come back here if you paid me. This show is toxic and you're the reason why. The cameras kept rolling as Blake stormed through the backstage area. You could hear him shouting to someone off camera, his voice still hot with anger. Get my stuff. We're leaving, right now. I'm done with this place. Production assistants scrambled to get out of his way. Someone tried to approach him, probably to calm him down, but Blake held up a hand. Don't, he said. Just don't. Get me my things and show me the exit. Joy was still standing at the table, her face flushed, breathing heavily like she'd just run a marathon. Her hands were shaking, and she grabbed her water glass to take a sip. The other hosts looked absolutely stunned. Alyssa Farenthold had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Sunny looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. Sarah was staring at the table, clearly uncomfortable, and probably wondering how this had spiraled so out of control. Well, Whoopi finally said, trying to regain some semblance of control over the situation. Her voice was steady, but you could hear the stress in it. I think we definitely need that commercial break now. Right now. But before they could cut away, Joy had one more thing to say. She grabbed her microphone with both hands and spoke directly to the camera, her voice still shaking with emotion. Let me tell you something, America. This is what happens when people can't handle the truth. Blake Shelton just proved everything I said about him was right. He can dish it out in his songs, he can make jokes on The Voice, but he can't take it when someone asks him a real question. He can't handle real conversation. That tells you everything you need to know about him. The audience was divided now. Half were applauding Joy, standing up and clapping, clearly on her side. The other half were booing loudly, some even shouting, "Let him speak!" And you were wrong. The chaos was unbelievable. The studio had never seen anything like this. One audience member stood up and yelled, "You ambushed him!" before security approached to calm things down. Another shouted, "Team Joy!" The division in the room was stark and undeniable. Backstage, Blake was grabbing his jacket from a crew member who looked terrified to even be near him. "This is exactly what's wrong with shows like this," he said, his voice still loud and angry. Someone with a camera phone was recording him, and he didn't care. He looked right at the camera. They invite you on, act all friendly in the pre-interview, tell you it's going to be fun and light, and then they try to make you look like an idiot. They try to trap you. Well, I'm nobody's punching bag. I'm nobody's target for ratings. A producer, a young woman with a clipboard, approached carefully. "Mr. Shelton, please, can we just talk about this for a moment? Maybe if we—" "No," Blake cut her off. "There's nothing to talk about. What happened out there was disrespectful, and I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. You tell whoever books guests for this show that they need to be honest about what kind of interview it's going to be. Don't tell people one thing and then do another." Another producer, an older man who looked like he'd seen plenty of show drama in his career, tried a different approach. "Blake, I understand you're upset, but—" "Upset?" Blake interrupted again. "I'm not upset. I'm angry. There's a difference. Upset is when someone accidentally spills coffee on you. Angry is when someone deliberately tries to embarrass you on national television." Back at the table, the other hosts were trying to figure out what to do. The cameras had finally cut to commercial, giving them a moment to breathe. Should we apologize? Sarah whispered to Whoopi, her voice barely audible. For what? Joy interjected sharply, clearly hearing her despite Sarah's attempt at discretion. He's the one who lost his temper. He's the one who couldn't handle a conversation. He stood up, he yelled, he cursed on live television. Why should we apologize? Joy, you were pretty harsh, Sunny said carefully, clearly trying not to start another fight. You had to know that question would upset him. I was honest, Joy corrected, her voice defensive but firm. There's a difference. I asked him a legitimate question that people want to know the answer to. He's a public figure. He doesn't get to hide from these questions forever. There's asking tough questions, and then there's being antagonistic. Alyssa finally spoke up, surprising everyone. I think maybe we crossed a line. Joy whipped around to face her. Are you serious right now? You're taking his side? I'm not taking sides, Alyssa said, raising her hands. I'm just saying maybe we could have handled it better. Meanwhile, Blake was at the exit door, surrounded by security guards and producers who were still trying to salvage something from the disaster. One producer, practically begging now, said, Sir, please, let's just talk about this. We can work something out. Maybe you could come back and we could do the interview over. Or, there's nothing to work out, Blake said firmly, his hand on the door handle. Tell your boss that show is toxic, and Joy Behar is the reason why. Tell them that if they want to book guests in the future, they better start showing some respect. Because word travels fast in this industry, and after today, I guarantee you're going to have a hard time getting people to come on that show. The producer looked stricken. She knew he was right. This was going to become industry gossip within hours. Blake pushed the door open with force. And one more thing, he said, turning back one last time. I feel sorry for the other hosts. They seem like decent people who got stuck working with someone who cares more about creating drama than having real conversations. As he walked out, you could hear his boots echoing in the hallway, each step deliberate and heavy. The door slammed behind him with such force that it made everyone jump, including the security guards. The sound echoed through the corridors, a final exclamation point on the entire confrontation. In the studio, the audience was still buzzing with shock and excitement. People were turned to each other, talking rapidly, gesturing, clearly processing what they'd just witnessed. Some were filming on their phones despite the no recording policy. This was too big not to capture. In the studio, the audience was still buzzing with shock and excitement. Joy sat back down, smoothing her hair and taking a sip of water. Her hands were still shaking slightly, but her face showed defiance. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't backing down. If anything, she looked more determined than ever. We'll be right back, Whoopi said to the camera once they were live again. But her voice was tired. You could hear the exhaustion in every word. This wasn't how the show was supposed to go. This wasn't what anyone had signed up for. The commercial break finally started, and chaos erupted on set all over again. Producers rushed to the table from all directions. The other hosts surrounded Joy, some looking angry, others looking concerned, all looking stressed. Through the cameras that were still recording for behind-the-scenes footage, you could hear heated arguments breaking out. You went too far, one voice said firmly. He came at me first. Joy defended herself, her voice still hot with anger. No, he didn't. You baited him from the start, another voice argued. You know exactly what you were doing. I was doing my job, Joy insisted. Since when is asking questions baiting someone? Since you asked them in that tone, with that attitude. Someone else chimed in. The argument continued, voices overlapping, tensions high. This wasn't just about Blake anymore. This was about the show itself, about boundaries, about what was acceptable and what wasn't. Outside the studio, Blake was climbing into his car. His face was still red with anger, his jaw clenched tight. A member of his team tried to speak to him, but Blake just shook his head. He didn't want to talk about it yet. He couldn't. He was still too angry. He slammed the car door, and the vehicle sped away from the ABC studios, tires squealing slightly as it pulled out, leaving behind one of the most dramatic exits in talk show history. Inside, the show tried to continue after the commercial break, but the energy was completely different. The remaining hosts looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. They tried to joke about it, tried to lighten the mood, tried to move on to other topics, but everyone in that studio knew what the real story of the day was. Everything else was just killing time. Joy attempted to explain her side during the rest of the show. Look, I ask tough questions. That's what I do. That's what I've always done. That's why people watch this show. If people can't handle it, that's not my problem, she said, her voice still defensive. We're not here to make celebrities feel comfortable. We're here to have real conversations about real issues. But even as she spoke, you could see the other hosts weren't entirely on her side. Sunny kept glancing away. Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear. Even Whoopi, who usually backed her co-hosts no matter what, seemed uncertain. The audience seemed split too, perhaps more divided than they'd ever been before. Some were Team Joy, appreciating her no-nonsense approach and her refusal to let celebrities off easy. They saw her as someone willing to ask the hard questions that others wouldn't. That's why we love her. One audience member could be heard saying, "She doesn't back down." Others were firmly Team Blake, feeling he'd been unfairly attacked and ambushed. They saw him as a victim of a gotcha-style interview that was designed to make him look bad no matter how he answered. He came here to talk about music, and she attacked him, another audience member said during a break. That wasn't fair at all. Social media was already exploding with clips of the confrontation. Videos from multiple angles were being shared thousands of times per minute. People were taking sides, debating who was in the wrong, creating memes, and dissecting every word, every gesture, every facial expression. The hashtags were trending worldwide within 15 minutes of the incident. What started as a simple appearance to promote new music ended with Blake Shelton walking out of the view, possibly never to return. The confrontation lasted less than 10 minutes, from first question to final door slam. But those 10 minutes gave us one of the most shocking moments in recent talk show history. It was the kind of moment that would be replayed, analyzed, and discussed for years to come. The tension had been building from the moment Joy asked that first loaded question about politics. Blake tried to deflect, tried to keep it professional and stay on topic, but Joy kept pushing. She kept prodding. She kept challenging him. And when you push someone hard enough, especially someone who's not used to being cornered like that, someone who values respect and straightforward conversation, they push back even harder. Blake's anger wasn't just about one question. It was about feeling ambushed, feeling disrespected, and feeling like he'd walked into a trap. He came to talk about music and ended up defending his character on national television. Joy's refusal to back down wasn't just stubbornness either. She believed she was doing her job, asking the questions that needed to be asked, not letting celebrities skate by with easy softball interviews. To her, Blake's reaction proved he couldn't handle real scrutiny. But regardless of who was right or wrong, the result was the same. Blake Shelton stormed out of the view, and the footage of that confrontation became instant viral gold. The video showed everything. The rising voices, the finger pointing. The moment Blake ripped off his microphone, Joy's demand to have him removed, and that final door slam that echoed through the entire studio. As Blake's car disappeared from the studio lot, producers inside were already dealing with the fallout. Phone calls were being made. Executives were being notified. Everyone knew this was going to be huge news. The other hosts finished the show, but their hearts clearly weren't in it. They'd just witnessed something that would define their program for weeks, maybe months to come. Every future guest would think about Blake's exit before stepping onto that stage. For Blake, the drive away from ABC Studios marked the end of what should have been a simple promotional appearance. Instead, it became one of the most talked-about moments of his entire career. He'd shown a side of himself most people never see: angry, defensive, and unwilling to be pushed around. For Joy, the confrontation reinforced her reputation as someone who doesn't pull punches. But it also raised questions about where the line is between tough interviewing and outright antagonism. Did she cross that line? Millions of viewers would spend the next several days debating exactly that. The stage where it all happened was now empty except for crew members cleaning up. The table where Blake had been sitting just minutes before looked normal again. No signs of the chaos that had unfolded there. But everyone in that studio knew they'd just witnessed something special, something that would be replayed and discussed for a long time. Blake's exit wasn't graceful or planned. It was raw, emotional, and completely unscripted. That's what made it so compelling. In an era where everything feels manufactured and rehearsed, this was real anger, real frustration, and a real breaking point caught on camera for everyone to see. The door Blake slammed on his way out seemed to echo with finality. It was the sound of a bridge burning, a relationship severing, and a moment that neither Blake Shelton nor Joy Behar would ever forget. The View had seen plenty of heated debates over the years, but this was different. This was personal. This was explosive. As the studio lights dimmed and the day's taping finally ended, everyone involved knew they'd just been part of television history. Not the kind of history you plan for or want necessarily, but the kind that happens when real emotions collide with live television. The kind of moment that people would be talking about for years, asking, what really happened between Blake Shelton and Joy Behar on The View? The answer was simple and complicated all at once. Two strong personalities clashed, neither willing to back down, and it all fell apart in spectacular fashion. Blake walked out that door, and with him went any pretense that the conversation had been anything other than a complete disaster.